it's empowering when you can have a hand in correcting the issues that you're dealing with, you know, and it's not a hard sell. You know, when you tell people, give the people the tools to do things their own way, right? But to have the tools to do it for themselves. So thank you everybody for inviting me over to talk about some of the work that I find so fascinating and engaging, working with communities all over Kent County, and in particular here in Five Rivers. I've been with this at this job for about a year now, a little bit over a year, and it's been just an amazing experience. So I'm from the region. I'm born in Rishabuktu, so I'm from right down the road over here. So I grew up in the context here, and I grew up poor, so I know what it is as a little kid to go into bed hungry at night. Times are tough, and it's not an easy place. It's not a very prosperous place, and a lot of people feel that pinch. One of the motivators for me to do this work was exactly that. I want to prevent other children and other families from going through that. And for me, gardening was, as a small kid, visiting grandma and grandpa's farm. There's always food there. So that brings to the second point. I'm an Acadian homesteader from a long line of homesteaders, farmers, and woodsmen. So for me, like growing food and cutting wood and taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and sharing your surpluses with your neighbors and your friends is part of my ethic. It's part of just the local culture. So for me to share this with my neighbors in the communities here is not hard because it's part of our common culture in this region, where we're used to taking care of one another. It's the old-fashioned country ethics, right? So I'm a butcher and meat cutter on one of my trades. I apprenticed here at DeWare's Supermarket. It's now Foodland. I worked there and I learned how to process meat and work safely in a meat cutting environment, in a commercial food processing environment where there's potential for contaminations and stuff like that. So keeping things safe and doing all of these things is something that I'm familiar with. Meat cutting for me as a homesteader and a farmer, raising my own animals and stuff like that, it cuts my costs because I have that skill, right? And I'm able to produce meat at a very, very inexpensive way and safe way because I learned the good techniques to make sure that my meat is safe and that my tools and stuff are safe to use down the road, right? So sanitation and using good practices are very, very important. I'm a visual artist by training and by trade. I'm a painter and a visual, like a draftsman. So I could draw people's portraits and landscapes and do all kinds of things like that. I worked for 20 years as a graphic artist and I burnt out. I burnt out hard and I could no longer work in that trade. My wiring got burnt and things just don't work and like they ought to. So since then I reinvented myself. While I was a designer and working a very stressful job, I would do gardening as my stress relief. It was my sanctuary and my way to disconnect from the stress of work and connect with the earth, with nature, and things that I felt that made me feel secure and at home, So to me, it's like bringing that to other people and bringing that therapy that I got from that contact with nature is an important part of my strategy to help families take care of their own and their own things that might be stressful for them, and sharing. Because in Kent County, many of our population have a little bit of property. They don't have much. They're not very rich. But a lot of them have a little bit of land, a little bit of corner where they have some dirt that they can scratch, put some seeds in there and grow some food, some food that's actually quite expensive to buy, but inexpensive to produce when you do the work yourself. And being self-sufficient is one of the values that are integral and part of our culture here in this part of the world, right? So it's an easy strategy to bring forward, and people seem to embrace that ethics and that kind of way of doing things. So I became an environmental technician with the Greater Cushpaquet Watershed Association. My gardening knowledge gave me I know a lot about plants and a lot about, I can name I walk in the woodlands and I can identify pretty much all the plants because there were weeds growing in my gardens. And it's like, oh, well, which one is this? And is that useful? And what's this good for? And so, I learned to identify a lot of different things like that. And that helped me get a career as an environmental technician where we worked towards doing things like restoring salmon populations, correcting habitat destructions and waterfront damage from flooding. And, sometimes the waterfronts just fall apart and you collapse and you lose some acreage. And I got to do a lot more public speaking when I started to work with an environmental technician, because there we had to do a lot of public outreach, and I started to meet people more closely here, because for 20 years I was working in Moncton away from here, and it was a great way for me to reconnect with my roots, my background, my people, my community, and it's and to do something to help heal degraded landscapes and degraded waterways. For me, it's just like trying to heal the land. It was so, for me, a wonderful experience. I did that for a few years, and then the pandemic hit, and our supply chains broke apart. Grocery stores' shelves were empty. And I was thinking, I had not much else to do, and I had an opportunity to come work with the RIC, Community Inclusion Network, as a food security coordinator there. And that helped, that provided me an opportunity to do something about the problems that our community was facing at the time. And since then, the RIC closed, and I moved on to the Kent Regional Service Commission to further along that same kind of role. So a little bit different, but a little bit more resources to do more work and be more effective. The commission has broader shoulders to be able to handle more weight, while a small nonprofit had a hard time getting the money that it needed to do the work we desperately wanted to do, right? So for me, it was a good opportunity to jump in there. So I became a community food mentor. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with what that is, but it's a program that's been started a little ways back, but it was started here in the Moncton region and in a couple of communities in the area, in Kokang in particular. And people, basically, it's a community food mentor program, is train the trainer to train people to do things for themselves, to produce food, to store food, to process it, to preserve it, and cook it and share it, and make sure that you're using good methods, that you're using nutritious food, and that you use the proper, safe methods to making your preserves. As a food mentor, what I do is I'm teaching people how to garden, how to produce food. I think that's the base of providing ourselves with food, and then after that you have some preserves and stuff like that. I don't focus so much on the preserves part, more on the producing. There's other people in the communities that are more into bottling and that kind of stuff, and we work together to try to do these things. I became a radio personality, which was completely left field for me. I'm an introvert, and for me, talking publicly and doing the radio shows and that kind of thing is like, it's nerve-wracking and very anxiety-driven for me. But it was a great way. It's hard to be able to reach out to people out where they are. But here I had an audience of 52,000 people that I could talk to and share this knowledge. And people call in, they ask questions about gardening, and it's non-stop, continuous. There's one call after the other for the full hour, and people left on hold at the end of the show. This just goes to show I'm there as a gardener. I'm one of the contributors. Some of the other contributors, we have a lawyer, we have a doctor, we have a politician, and me, a gardener. And what does that say about our culture here? You know what I mean? So that tells you that folks, they recognize that gardening and producing food is a really important part of our culture and our way of doing things in this area. So right now, like I said, I'm the coordinator for food resilience and the environment with the Regional Service Commission, and now I actually get paid to do a lot of the things that I really care about. And I'm delighted to be able to come here today and share some of this work with you. So I work based on the gardener's ethic, that where you provide the resources and care needed to thrive. So here, there's 2 lettuce plants that I had in one of the presentations and one of the works that I've been working with some of the kindergarten kids. Okay, so we planted these seeds together. We planted some lettuce. Now the lettuce plant on the left here, they were both planted at the same time, but this one was kept in its original pot, and its needs were ignored, and it was left to its own devices. While this one was spoiled a little bit more. It was given more dirt, more soil, bigger plate room for its roots, more vermicompost. We added vermicompost. The kids get a kick out of working with the worms of the vermicompost. So we brought some vermicompost and we gave it, and then I had the kids taste the difference between the 2 lettuce plants. We noticed that the plant is much smaller and scraggly. It's actually quite bitter. It's sour because it's living in stress, continuous stress, while the other plant has the resources that it needs. So that for me was teaching the kids an important lesson. Yes, the plant needs water, it needs soil, it needs sunlight, but the one more ingredient that it needs is the love and care of the person that's managing the garden. That's one of the critical ingredients, the love and care, to make sure that something reaches the success that it requires. So that's kind of like a visual representation of this ethic that I employ in my work. That I come into communities, I find out, what do you need in your community? I don't come there with my ideas. I come there with resources. I come there with the commission's backing and the ability to write grant requests, reports, whatever the community needs, to find the resources they need. And I provide a lot of the care and the guidance and the mentorship that they need in order to make their projects successful. So I'm not here managing all of the projects. I'm collaborating with the locals and helping them make their magic work. So we have 10 community gardens in Kent County. Now that's the most community gardens in any county in the province. No county has as many community gardens as we do. That just goes to show that it's an integral part of our local culture. We're a rural area, and we do things the rural way, and growing food is part of that. So we have a new community garden here in Five Rivers, the Bowenalaw Commons Community Garden, pictured here. So this is a new garden that we set up this spring, and I assisted the group to plant it out. We did the rows, and it was tilled, and we just came in and we did the rows and planted a bunch of plants, and we helped, but I'm not there every day to take care of it. Is we have a local volunteer who comes, takes care of it, and she does amazing work, and basically we also have kind of like a cabinet or a booth on the grounds where the vegetables from the garden are put there to share with members of the community. So anybody can come in, take a vegetable, leave a vegetable, and basically the food that's grown here is all intended to be shared with the community. There's also a community garden in Alduane, St. Louis, St. Antoine. Kokang Community Garden does a lot of amazing work. They've been doing work for a number of years, and I'll go to circle back to them a little bit later. St. Mary St. Mary Community Garden is the only one right now that we have that is incorporated as an individual nonprofit group, and I want to see the rest of the other community gardens do the same, because that will allow them to access more funding and take donations and different things from the community. So that's one of the projects that I want to implement a little bit and work with them. there's some reticence, a little hesitation to incorporate, because some of these volunteers don't necessarily want to be involved with a lot of the paperwork that's involved with all of that. But I think for the longevity of these gardens, I think it'll be an important part. Keep them going for a long time. The Bouctouche First Nation. So all of the community gardens that are highlighted, that are bold, are new ones that were established this year. So Bouctouche First Nation. I'm working with Mary Geldart, one of the elders of the community, and basically I'm mentoring her on gardening, and she and I together are mentoring the Head Start daycare kids on how to garden, how to start seeds, and all of that kind of stuff, processing food. Mary takes the produce that's grown on her community garden, and she makes preserves, and she stores that at the band office, and it's like their own food bank. So people from the community can come in, they'll get some jam and some different preserves and some bottled beans and different things like that. They can take it home. They'll have some moose meat, of course, and all kinds of different things. But basically, it's like giving sovereignty to take care of your own, and that's an important part. People are proud, and they deserve, to be given the tools to do what they would like to do, for one another. Indian Island Head Start Daycare is another one that we collaborated together this year to put together. So it's at daycare on the site. So last fall, I planted some blueberry bushes, some high bush blueberry bushes. This spring, we planted a Three Sisters garden. We just harvested the corn. So together, we're going to let the corn dry out. So we're going to be replanting the seeds that we harvested next spring. So the kids are seeing the complete life cycle of gardening, from growing the plant, harvesting and saving seeds, and then starting it up again, and keeping those annual cycles. So we're connecting with the land and connecting with the seasons and the way the ebbs and flows of nature. And in particular, Indian Island, their site is a new construction, so the soil is quite dead. So for me, it's one of the things that I want to help people understand, is that soil is a living thing. So there's no vitality in the soil, the plants can't thrive. So what I'm teaching, in particular the kids at Indian Island, because their site is degraded soil, I'm teaching them how to heal the land. And for them, that's a powerful thing. This is a generation of kids. They're small, they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. They're the generation that are going to have to do a lot of the work to restore ecological balance and health, and they're going to be dealing with a lot of the issues that are coming up with climate change. And so I'm giving them the tools to how to produce food locally, how to heal land, how to sequester carbon in garden soil. Regenerative agriculture is a different way of growing food than we do commercially. Commercial production can often degrade land. But in regenerative agriculture, what we're doing is we're adding atmospheric carbon into the soil. All the living organisms that live in soil, they're made out of atmospheric carbon. So when we're composting leaf matter and hay and grass clippings and stuff like that, that's carbon that came from the air. It's going into your soil. It's becoming worms. It's becoming bacteria and all the mushrooms and all of the different things that vitalize soil and make it functional and they open up tunnels, and they create structures that allow air and water to infiltrate freely into the soil. And that's this kind of conditions that plants grow best in. So these are some of the things that I'm teaching these kids, these regenerative agricultural methods that will actually make a difference, because now, yes, they're sequestering carbon, not a whole lot of carbon in their garden soil, but because their food production system is within walking distance of their food consumption at their kitchen table, you're not burning petroleum products and adding to pollution. You're actually doing something significant in a small scale. We're not trying to save the world. We're just trying to save ourselves and take care of one another here, right? So when on a small scale, they're actually doing something positive, and they feel good about that. Right? The Bucktouche Community Garden at the Clement Cormier School also has a great program going there. There's some work that needs to be done. I got to get some funding to help them with fix their greenhouse. There's plastic being torn, so I'm looking for some funding there to help them repair that. The Richelieu Community Garden right now is on hold. I'm looking for a piece of property. I may have found a little corner of the region where we can put a community garden. But basically, I got some funding, I got some materials, I got things to build, and I just want to find a site in order to get it going. We have a growing community of new arrivals to the region who would like to have their little corner to grow foods and vegetables that they might be familiar with, and also like growing food, putting gardeners together, especially who have different backgrounds. You put them together in the same area, they talk. They exchange notes. They learn from one another. It's a great way to integrate people into a community and to bring their distinctiveness and their unique flavors that they might be used to our region. And we can appreciate some of their cooking and some of their vegetables, and they can appreciate some of ours, and we can have that cultural exchange, right? I have a composting program that I'm working with all of these community gardens. And also I do a lot of presentations. I go to different communities. Here on the right, we have a sign for the Indian Island band who invited me recently to do a presentation on how to make compost. And basically, what you see on the image on the left over here is a simple compost bay. Just I ask people to throw in all of their veggies, fill it all the way up to the top. Here they kind of threw the fresh stuff in the middle there, but basically I want them to put everything all the way up to the top, let it decompose and transform itself. It's like a fermentation process that takes all of these different vegetable matter and turns it into the black, gold, beautiful stuff that makes plants come alive, right? For providing compost. We used to do that with the rick. Providing compost is become extremely expensive. We were seeing bills of almost $600 per community garden per year, and funding agencies just don't want to provide that. So I do this composting outreach throughout all of my gardening network to help lower the operating costs of growing food. Making compost is one of those skills that every gardener should know, because then instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on growing tomatoes that would have been cheaper to go to the grocery store to go get, you see memes on Facebook all the time and it says, oh yeah, here's my $80 tomato, and it's like, well, okay, but if you make your own compost and you do a lot of the work at home, like myself at home, I raise chickens, so I take a lot of the chicken manure and all of the garden debris, and I run around the neighborhoods in the fall when people collect all of their leaves and they bag it up and they put it at the road. Well, I find that extremely convenient because I run around and I load that up. I take home around 300 to 400 bags of leaves every year to make my compost and for bedding for my chickens. Chickens are forest creatures. They're used to walking on leaves. For them, it's natural and it's comfortable and it's sanitary, right? So every time there's a little bit of poopies and gets a little bit muddy, you put a new layer of leaves, and that creates, a carbon diaper that absorbs all of that nastiness and holds it in place and prevents it from leaching out and contaminating waterways and the rest of my property. And then I could take that, compost it, and turn it into black gold that makes my cost of living extremely shrink. Lowering operating costs. This year, I spent $251, and that's 80 something cents on seeds. And I'm growing. I'm going to get about somewhere around $6,000 to $9,000 worth of food from that initial investment. So that's something, when we're doing the work ourselves, making soil fertility out of garbage that's lying around the yard. That's a powerful way to lower people's cost of living. And so that's some of the things I want to share with folks. Making compost is not that hard. There's some labor involved, and sometimes it's nice to have a young nephew show up. You give him a little a couple of pizzas and maybe a 6-pack of beer, and he'll turn your compost for you. Sometimes that's convenient, when we don't have the back anymore to do that kind of work. But basically, finding all of this stuff and building up the pile, it's very simple. I get school kids to make this. This is compost bins that I built at the Bouctouche Community Garden at the Clément Cormier School. They also have in the background, it's a little bit more this way, some tree orchards. They have apples and pears and cherries and all kinds of different things like that. I taught them how to prune the trees and some maintenance on those trees as well. So a lot of that got wood chipped. All of those tree trimmings got wood chipped and added to the compost pile as well. So basically nothing is ever wasted. So recycling of nutrients is an important part of producing food, right? So there's no such thing as waste in nature. Nature recycles everything. And that's something that we as a society, human civilization has forgotten. And that's where I'm bringing some of that back and saying, we're part of nature too, and we have a role to play. We forgot it. We made a mess. Now, this is how we clean it, right? So organic gardening is an ecological and low-cost approach to producing food. So by using plants that fix nitrogen, like clover here, also beans and peas. So if you're growing corn, for instance, it's a very greedy plant as far as nitrogen. And it's one of those expensive fertilizers that farmers go almost bankrupt for getting every year to fertilize their fields, and then it rains, and a lot of that nitrogen leaches into waterways and contaminates waterways. And we're seeing, populations of fish and stuff, decline because of these issues. But if you use plants that produce nitrogen and you grow them, their roots mixed in with plants that are greedy, like you plant your corn, and around your corn stalk, you plant your beans. The beans are feeding your corn, and you don't have to buy nitrogen fertilizer to get your corn to grow nice. And besides that, as an added bonus, when you're picking your beans every 3 days in the summer heat in August, you're doing it in the shade, right? So there's a lot of ways to make gardening easier, simpler, better than some of the ways we've been doing things in the past. The image over here on the right, we're showing some of the no-till and polyculture techniques. So basically tillage. We do a lot of tilling. Soil doesn't like to be disturbed. Nature doesn't do that. Nature never tills soil. And what happens is that especially in the commercial production of food, they will, especially here, they'll till in the fall and leave the soil bare through the winter months, because they can't get their tractors in there early in the spring to till it, because they just bog down. The ground is too wet. So they do it in the fall so that it's easier when they are ready to go and plant in the spring. But what happens there, if you'll notice, you'll see huge trenches of soil that's been eroded out. I've seen some fields. I live in St. Paul, so I run around a lot in that area, and St. Mary and stuff like that. And you'll see trenches that are this wide, this deep, 500, 600, 700 meters long. And you might have 10, 20, 30 of them in a field. All of that soil, that's topsoil that is no longer on the farmer's land producing food. It's now in the waterways, contaminating waterways, filling pools, no more room for trout and salmon. It's the waterways are shallower, they get warmer, and because they're shallower, when the flood comes, it goes wider and it breaks people's waterfronts. So we're seeing this on the ground. When there's a big rain and you see the river look like chocolate milk, that's not normal. That's not natural. That's what we're doing there, is we're watching that river die. It's bleeding to death. And we're also seeing the farmers going broke, because now their topsoil is no longer on their land, getting them rich, making them wealthy. It's degraded. So every year they do that, the soil gets worse and worse and worse and harder and harder and harder to turn a profit, to grow the food that they need to grow in order for their bottom line. Right? So I'm showing methods where you don't actually need to till soil. we till soil because we want to get rid of weeds, right? So here, instead, we just cover the soil with a tarp in the fall. Weeds don't grow. So when you're ready to plant in the spring, you just pull the tarp aside, you plant. So you're not tilling, you're not making new rows, you're not doing all of that. Labor is all eliminated. You don't have to do that. Now all you have to do is just, plant your seeds, put in your transplants, cover it with some mulch, because in nature, the ground is always covered with either a growing plant or plant material, dead plant material covering it. So if you do that, you'll notice in my walkway here, it's all hay. You don't see my soil bare in my garden. I plant my plants so close together, there's no room for weeds to grow. So if a weed is growing someplace, to me, I could have put an onion there, or I could have put a lettuce there, or a bean plant. So for me, it's reduction in my productive capacity. So in these garden beds, I have three rows of onions, a row of carrots, and a row of cabbage, all in a 36-inch wide garden bed. Okay, and that's 50 foot long. Okay, so, and I don't have to weed it because it's so close together. There's no sunlight reaching the ground. There's also no sunlight reaching the ground to dehydrate the soil and evaporate the water. So the soil water levels there's moisture there, even in the hottest part of summer, right? And basically, and these walkways are level trenches. So basically, I'll just cut a trench, nice and level. I'll take that topsoil, put that on top of my garden bed. So it passively absorbs water. Any drop of water that falls there would stay there. It doesn't flow off. It doesn't leave my property. The nutrients that are in that water that come out of my garden bed don't leave the garden. They stay there. They absorb underground, and each garden bed is like steps, and they're a little bit lower than the next. So the water that leaches out of here goes into this garden bed and feeds that one, then so on and so on, all the way down the hill. So the water never contaminates. The soil never contaminates the waterways because it doesn't reach it. It stays in place. So these are some techniques that I want to show folks. Produce food in ways that are not destructive to nature, that are more productive and more profitable and less labor intensive for the producer, right? So this is not, you wouldn't produce grain this way. And we're not a region for growing grains, like wheat and barley and that kind of stuff. We're more of a vegetable growing area, fruits and vegetables. And these are some methods that are extremely, extremely profitable and extremely simple to implement. One person can manage about a half acre like this. So that can feed a lot of people. I grow basically 60% of all of my food this way. And that's my cost of living, that's why it's so low. And it allows me to pay some of the luxuries like the electric bill, right? And, or paying the mortgage or the rent, that kind of thing, right? So that's some of that freedom that I want to give my neighbors here throughout Kent County. So here are my community food mentors. This is the group that we had this spring at the Bass River Hall. So we started the program there. I want to focus, because we're such a rural area and people sometimes are far away, like 40, 50 kilometers away from the closest grocery store type of thing, right? Some of them are living in dirt roads and it's difficult to get around in certain times of year. So I want to start my programs like that for mentors in those areas that are harder to reach and harder to service. Because a lot of resources oftentimes are in your urban areas, and the rural areas often get left behind, get forgotten. So knowing this is a characteristic of our region. I'm focusing first on the rural areas. Here I came to Bass River, a wonderful group of people, and basically we gave them a in-class practicum. We did the training for the community food mentor. We went in the kitchen. I taught them knife safety, how to chop vegetables, but leave your fingertips attached, that kind of thing. But and basically, a lot of them have very different skill sets. So we have a person who's a permaculture gardener, like myself, and he's here. He's doing some consultation. So he's going to be helping other gardeners and other commercial producers set up shop in our communities. We have one person who is a forager, who knows the plants and vegetables and different things that we can forage for food in the woodlands, and she takes people out on tours. We have another who used to run a Meals on Wheels program in Ontario when she lived there. So I'm talking to her a lot right now to see what kind of logistics would we need to set up a Meals on Wheels program in our region, the Five Rivers, and particularly Harcourt Bass River area, and bring food to folks who, live independently, live alone. Sometimes I met a few people. I came in and I visited. I have a little video as I showed the drive that she has to go through. She's elderly. She's 77 years old. And she was telling me about some of the challenges that she had. So I went with her and I visited her at home, and she told me, what challenges does she face trying to live at home, live independently, but with increasing health issues, and what kind of stresses that she has to go through for that. So I understand the context of the problems we're trying to solve. And it was eye-opening. So another strategy, because our kids, these kids that are growing up right now, these little kids, they're the ones that are going to have to they're going to be dealing with challenges that we don't even understand what's coming, right? And their world is a lot more challenging than it was when I was a little kid, when I was their age. So I want to start with them at a younger age. First of all, so kids that grow their own food, or they grow food, they want to taste it. So you want to get a kid to eat their vegetables, have them grow it in the garden first, and I guarantee you they're going to take a bite out of that broccoli, that bean. They're going to be eating that carrot right out of the ground, and they're going to enjoy it, and they'll be eager to share it with everybody around them. So this is a group here that I worked with in MFR school in St. Louis, but I have a program also right here right now at the Creating Wonders daycare, just beside the school here in Rexton, and we're going to be seeing a little bit of what that looks like over there. But basically, what we did here, the tomato plant we have right over here. So through the winter months, with artificial lights and in the classroom, we grow some tomatoes. It's not ideal conditions for the tomatoes, not what the tomato wanted, but we did get some tomatoes. We harvested the seeds, and right here, they're transplanting the seeds that they grew from the plant that they grew into their garden for the summer months. And right now they're harvesting tomatoes, and they're enjoying that in class. So this is a poster that we sent out to recruit different daycares throughout the county. And I wanted to have at least one daycare in each region as much as possible, in each of the municipalities. First of all, just so I can introduce myself to the communities. Basically, I'm not pushing my program on the daycares. Basically, I'm offering the program, and if one of the teachers wants to take on those extra projects, and because it's a little bit of extra work, basically I come in every week, work with that teacher, and I'll do a lot of the labor, not let her or him do so much of the extra work, maintaining the garden, that kind of thing. I do that so that I can liberate her to teach, and she doesn't have to worry about the just showing up every day, every other day, weeding it out. When the kids are back home and that kind of thing. I don't want to weigh them down. Their job is hard enough already. So basically, I just want to help her give an more enriching environment and learning experience for the kids. So this is the Creating Wonders daycare. So I'm not going to show you pictures of the kids necessarily, because I respect the privacy of people's kids and stuff like that. I'm not going to put kids' pictures all over the internet, kind of thing. There's a couple of pictures here for reports and that kind of thing, but that's part of my way of working things. I'm not photographing the kids, but in the class here, so when I'm teaching these kids, I'm showing them the different weeds that are growing around their garden, so they can identify which plant you're supposed to pull out and which one's actually supposed to stay in your garden, right? So they need to know the difference between the two. So I'm sending the kids out to identify, this is a dandelion, this is a clover, this is a purslane, this is, different things, and they're learning them, right? So here on this wall, Crystal's got all pictures of these different things and the different lessons that we're learning together. She brings the kids back into the class afterwards, and some of it they'll draw it out. They'll go on the internet, find pictures of it, or they'll take a photograph, they'll put it up, and she'll put it up on the wall there, and all kinds of different things. Bean plant growth on the different stages of the bean plant. I talked to them about how beans help fertilize other plants, or a good friend to other plants. It's a symbiotic relationship. So I'm teaching them about symbiosis and the partnerships that happen in nature, and how being a good friend is an important part of nature's resilience strategy, right? So also teaching them how cooperation and working together and teamwork is part of all of this food growing thing, and part of their growing experience, and learning to cooperate with one another as well, right? And to be open to other cultures and other type people that might be in the neighborhood. Diversity is part of nature's resilience plan. You never see a field or a forest that's all one type of plant. Nature always has grouped together diverse different organisms, plants, animals, working together to make an environment, an ecological zone, right? So this is part of the ethics of gardening, and just basically just being a good person, right? So here's a vermicomposting demonstration where I'm showing kids how to turn food scraps into fertile soil. So in the classroom over here, we have the worm towers that the kids have in their class. And we're doing this in a way that's not going to have a lot of worms and all kinds of flies and all that kind of thing, or stinky things and stuff like that. I'm showing them how to feed the worms just enough for them to process it, but it doesn't turn into a yucky, nasty mess that's going to make everybody ill, right? But the kids are fascinated with the worms, and they absolutely want to get into there. And I show them how worms are a really important part of gardening, because the worms come in, they eat anything that's decomposing, and then they go back down, and they're making tunnels. And those tunnels allow air and water to infiltrate into your soil, so that when you water your plant, it doesn't flow into the side and into the walkway and go away and evaporate. It actually absorbs in the soil, and the plant can have access to it, right? So worms are a really important part of gardening, and this is a great way to get them to see that in class. So now the kids are looking at this and they're going like, okay, what can we do with this? And they're thinking about little business propositions, different things. Where can we sell this? Can we sell the worm juice that comes out of that? Because that's a powerful fertilizer for plants and that kind of thing. So, there's entrepreneurship, there's innovation, there's all kinds of different things that the kids get passionate about. And we're trying to find, basically what I'm trying to do is find those kids in that classroom that might consider a career in agriculture. We need to regrow our local population of farmers, food producers. We've lost 95% of our farmers in the region in the last few generations, and we need to replenish that. And so if I can get one kid in each class to become a farmer, he can feed the rest of the classmates, right? So that's where we're getting at. So learning wild plants. So I find it very important for the kids to learn the different wild plants. So they know which plants to pull out of the garden, which plants to leave in, but also to identify those that are dangerous. So this is a nightshade plant that I found growing at the daycare in Indian Island. So nightshade is a deadly plant, quite toxic, and basically birds eat the berries and they poop out the seeds, and voila, it pops out and pretty much anywhere randomly. But it looks like a beautiful little blueberry that you could eat, right? So I showed the kids, look, this, you can't just eat anything that you find out there. You have to clearly identify what it is. If you don't know, if you're not sure, don't eat it, right? And I showed them this plant that, this is growing here. It's not bothering anybody, but it's actually, we don't want to keep it here, right? So, teaching them, instead of being afraid that nature is out to kill you, when you're aware of these dangers, you're equipped to protect yourself, right? The more you know, the better, the safer you are. So I show them and I teach them these different things, the beneficial plants and also the harmful ones, so that they're safer when running around and playing in the wild, when they're unsupervised, So my personal goal is an agricultural renaissance in Kent County. I want to encourage permaculture and regenerative agriculture that's going to heal the land and not impoverish our farmers, so that they have a viable business plan that's going to keep them producing and increasing the prosperity of our region. I want to see new innovations in greenhouse technology and four seasons gardening, so that the production of food is consistent enough that it's going to serve the needs of the consumers in our region. I want to use agricultural methods that sequester atmospheric carbon, right? It's an important part of anything that we're going to do in the future. To do something about climate change, we have to do things that are going to be reducing the negative impacts that we've had in the last 100 years, right? Slow food. So instead of fast food that makes you ill, slow food. A vegetable that you peel will have so many more vitamins and nutrients in it than something that come out of a freezer box that you can just pitch into the microwave, right? So I want to increase the number of farms in our region. I want to invite as many farmers and producers here as possible, because if we don't have enough, the industry won't be viable. We have to reach a certain threshold of producers in order to make the whole industry, relevant, especially in the modern age where we have large mega corporations, 4 mega corporations controlling all of the grocery stores in North America, right? So they need competition in order to make prices go down, and local producers can provide that competition. Integration of locally produced food into a network of grocery stores and convenience stores, small little convenience stores. So if we can set up CSAs where, local farmers will contribute to a vegetable box that's delivered to a local convenience store in our rural communities. Local people can come in and pick up their box, pick up their milk from the convenience store and the other things that might not be in the box. And, that way our local small stores are part of that plan. They're profiting from it. And it provides a viable, strategy to keep everybody working together and keep these networks internal into our region. And I think Kent County, being between Miramichi and Moncton, larger centers, we are conveniently placed to become a good producer to bring food to these more larger urban centers. So also providing a viability for an investor or a producer who might want to move to this area, because we have large markets that are actually hungry for local, fresh, organic vegetables. So some of the innovations that might help local agriculture, this is one example. This is a wallapini. Doesn't look like much from the outside. It's a greenhouse basically on a foundation, on a basement. And it uses the ambient temperature of the ground that stays around 10 Celsius year round. So it's less hard to keep this warm and produce even in January, February. So in a structure like this, even in our climate, without having electric or other heat, just ambient heat, you can still produce lettuce and carrots and broccoli and different things like that through the winter months. Spinach and some cold-loving crops like that, peas. So a farmer in our region could still be serving customers. Match that with a storage bin to keep potatoes and carrots and different things like that keep well through the climate control like that. Kokang also, they built this structure after they had already built a storage bay, a building that's climate controlled to store surplus crops for the winter months. So the community garden there produces a bunch of different things, and they store it in that building. They share it with the school. The school pays them market value for the vegetables, and then the the garden donates that money back to the school for the breakfast programs. And so that's how they fund programs in their region, right? And basically producing, storing, sharing is locally is some of the strategies that I'm trying to employ and try to bring to different folks in our region. So final thing, I'm recording everything that I do, all the presentations that I do, and also all the different presenters that I bring in to explain different things. I record everything so that there's a record and people can review, they can go back and see, and also we can celebrate some of the innovations that are in our area and the different things and kind of bring some pride. You know, Kent County has often been an area that people are kind of like, oh, you're going to Kent County? And it's like, oh, yeah. And, you know, to have that kind of like that negative tone about it, you know, but in reality, there's a lot of really special things and wonderful things that are going on here. And this is my way of putting a spotlight on some of that, not necessarily on myself. Unfortunately, I have to put the camera on myself to do it. It's not my, I'd rather point the camera at other people, being a shy person myself, but it has to be done. And I'm looking right now for different gardeners in the area to go and interview and take some, you know, most gardeners will take pictures of their stuff. So I want to do some interviews and do some highlights of different gardeners in our region and showing the different methods that they might use and something original and innovative that they might have come up with. And it's like, hey, that could use that in my garden, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to work on right now. And just trying to record everything. So with a background in graphic design and that kind of stuff, I do my own video editing and I do all of that stuff and, you know, thumbnail design and all of that kind of stuff. I kind of limit a little bit how much design work that I do, but this is it. This is the only design work that I do at the moment.